Yo, what's up? It's Driscoll. In today's video, I'm gonna try to give you guys a TEAROUT 101 guide on how to make some really powerful stuff, going from the intro into the build-up, into the drop and the different variation in the drop. So stick around for this, and without further ado, let's hear it.
Welcome, unkindled one, purloiner of cinders. The mantle of Lord interests me none. The fire-linking curse, the legacy of lords, let it all fade into nothing. Ill-starred are they who take the throne. I shall not stand among them. You've done quite enough. Now have your rest. The royal sword of Lothric shall grant you peace. Rise if you would, for that is our curse. If you like.
Alright, so we're gonna start up with the drop because I know you guys are here for this, but I would suggest that you also stay around for the intro because I can probably give you some good information there and it's just as important. So for the drop, I'm gonna show you how I made this gun sound from scratch. I started with a simple serum patch that sounds like this. And the way to make it is by using some sort of wavetable. I chose the Gremlin wavetable from the spectral menu here. I added 16 voices unison and reduced a lot the detune. And with the first LFO, I'm modulating the volume and the high notch filter like this. This is how the sound sounds like without any effects on it. So as you can see, it's just a really snappy sound, and this is what you want for a gun sound like that. Going into the effects, I started with a hyper dimension with the mix at 0 for the hyper, the size at 0 for the dimension, and the mix at 25%. And then I added this diode 1 distortion with the LFO1 on the mix going from 0 up to 48%. And then to beef it up even more, I added this multiband compressor. But then the sound really comes out of the reverb filter and especially the movement of the cutoff here. So the cutoff is set at 25 Hz and it's going up +7 using the same LFO, and this is how it sounds now. And this is exactly what you want to get if you want to make a gun layer. So I took this and I resampled it and then I put it in my main gun section. And this is how the gun sounds as is without any processing. Alright, and then I started with an OTT, output is up, time is up, amount is down. Then I added some reverb. And then I added the first frequency shifter. So I say the first frequency shifter because the way I like to do it is that I create variation of the tonal gun layer using frequency shifter most of the time. And sometimes the sound that I have using one frequency shifter is pretty good and I want to keep it that way. I don't want to change it. So if I like the way it sounds now and then I want to add variation, I'm going to add another frequency shifter to the sound and then another one and then another one just to have easy easier way to come back to the first sound if I need to, and it just helps a lot with the variation. You know, there's probably an easier way to do this, but that's how I do it, and I don't really care. So the first frequency shifter I have is set on 24 Hertz, and it sounds like this. This one is not being modulated, it's just adding more high-pitched frequencies. Then I added this kilohertz transient shaper to give it more attack and more pump. And then I added the first EQ just to remove some annoying frequencies and shape the sound a little more. Then another reverb. A saturator, the drive is at 4.5 decibels, the soft clip is activated, and the output is down. And then a second shifter. So this one is being automated. So as you can see, it's going up over time. It starts down at minus 146 Hertz, going up to 1.6 Hertz. And this is how it sounds. And then on the second part, I leave it down at minus 141. And this section is where the other shifters are going to come in. The next effect I have is another shifter, bringing all the sound at minus 54 Hertz. This one is not being automated. This is how it sounds now. Then I added another reverb. This one is being automated on the dry and wet just to create some sort of reverb throw. And then the final shifter, for the first section it starts down at 500 Hertz. And then later in the drop I can use that one to create some different variation. So that shifter and the other one that's being automated, in combination together, they can create some really nice stuff. And I just find it easier to have different shifters for different parts, because then I can go back to the first one if I don't like it. It's just easier for me, but you know, you can find a way to do it even more efficiently. I'm just explaining to you how I do it. After this, I'm adding this EQ again, just to cut off the low end and shape a little bit the high end. And also I'm cutting the low end on the sides of the sound because that sound is really wide and I don't want it to mess with the rest of the mix. Then I added a utility just to make sure that the bass up to 120 Hz is mono, and then an auto filter mostly used in the build-up section. So that's it for the gun. And now I want to show you the second most important stuff that goes hand in hand with the gun, and of course I'm talking about the sub bass. So how to make a sub bass like this. So this is how it sounds before any processing. And the way to make it is that I'm using a sine wave with a little bit more harmonics. LFO1 is modulating the coarse pitch just to give it more attack. LFO2 is modulating the volume, and LFO3 is modulating the master tuning. So if you look here in the matrix, I'm going both ways, meaning that the center point here in the middle is the normal pitch, and I'm going up 44. That doesn't matter too much. The important part here is that the first part is higher in pitch, creating this attack, and the last part is going down. It creates this really bouncing effect on the sub bass. And then in the post-processing is nothing special, mostly using a lot of distortion and saturation, a lot of EQing, and I also added this erosion just to add some white noise after all the distortion. So before the erosion, this is how it sounds. Just a really distorted sub bass, but if you add the erosion, that's how it sounds. Then the next thing I want to talk about is the first hit of the drop, and I changed that sound every 4 bars just to keep it interesting. So the first hit of the drop sounds like this, and I'm going to show you how to make it in Serum. So without any effects, this is how the sound sounds like. I'm using this wavetable from the spectral menu, and it's being FM'd by this sine wave. LFO1 is modulating the wavetable position, the FM amount, the level, and the cutoff of the all-pass filter. And then going into the effects, I'm using hyper dimension with the mix at 0 for the hyper, size at 0 for the dimension, and the mix is at 37%. And I'm using this asim distortion with the drive at 39% and this multiband compressor just to beef it up. It's a really basic growl actually. Then in the post-processing, I started with a disperser, and then I added a second disperser. And if you have good headphones, you can hear the low frequency shift that it's creating, and this is a really amazing plugin, especially if you add more than one. It just beefs up the low end so much, it's really good. Then I added this EQ to shape up a little bit the mids, an OTT with the output up, time up, amount is down, a saturator at 5 decibels, soft clip is activated, a reverb, and then a final EQ just to cut out the low end a little bit. And then on the other section, I think I'm mostly using samples. So here I have a Kashmir glitch sample. I might have stretched it a little bit to make it sound grittier. And then on this part, I'm using 2 different company glitch samples. The first one is set at the end of this 8-bar section, and the other one is set at the beginning of the next section. And then after this, I'm going back to the Kashmir glitch sample, just using another section of the same sample. Alright, so that's it for the main elements of the drop, but now I want to tell you about all the support elements that make all the difference in the world in your drop. So I'm going to start by showing you this half-note growl that's steadily playing in the background and why it's important. The reason it's important is because the gun pattern is so inconsistent, and also it's not on the grid all of the time. As you can see, if I zoom in a little bit, you can see that this sound is not on the grid, this one is not on the grid, this one is not on the grid either. You know, at some different parts, the gun is off grid, and it's really good to have a steady pattern going on in the background. So to achieve this, I have a half note pattern that sounds like this. And it's playing all the way through the drop. So here's how it sounds without any processing. I'm using this Evo Long Grease wavetable from the digital menu here. It's being FM'd by this triangle wave, and it's going into a bend notch filter. LFO1 is modulating all of these filter parameters, and LFO2 is modulating the level. And the sound really comes out of this downsample distortion. So if I remove it, that's how it sounds. But then with the downsample at 50%, this is how it sounds now. And then I'm adding this phaser and this chorus just to make the sound a bit wider. And a multiband compressor just to beef it up a little bit. And then going into the post-processing, I started with these 2 OTTs. So same thing, output is up on both of them, time is up, and the amount is down. It's then going into a saturator, and it's pretty saturated at 17 dB with the soft clip activated, and the output is down. Then I added this EQ to shape the sound in the mids. Then this erosion just to add even more noise. Another OTT, output is up, time is up, amount is down. Another saturator at 6 decibels, soft clip is on, output is down. So as you can see up to here, I just crushed the sound, and then I'm EQing it to shape it the way I want it. Then I have this auto filter only for transition purposes. And now this is how the sound sounds like. And as you can see, there's a lot of artifact at the end when I stop playing the sound. So to clean that up, I'm using this auto pan on half notes at 80% just to make sure that all that is played is the half note sound, not the artifact after that. And then the final EQ just to cut out the low end. And then the next layer I have is this dissonant layer that I have playing all the way through the drop. And the way to make this is really easy. As you can see, the post-processing is only an EQ, cutting out the low end on both the mids and the sides. And the patch itself is this wavetable from the analog section. 7 voices unison, a lot of detune, 85%, this flanger H6- filter, and this LFO. So I removed the BPM setting on the LFO and I just fine-tune it the way I wanted it. And this one is modulating the level, the fine-tuning, and the cutoff filter. This is what's creating the wobbled sound. In the effects, I just have some hyperdimension, a compressor, and a reverb. And then I'm using this macro on the cutoff just to change where the wobble of the sound happens in the flanger filter here. And this is how I create variation of that sound. And then the last support bass layer that I have is a short growl playing every time there's a kick. So every time there's a kick hitting, this bass sound is also hitting at the same time. This is how it sounds, without any processing and without any effects. So I'm just using this spectral wavetable, FMing it by a saw wave. LFO1 is modulating the level, the sync, and the cutoff and the frequency on the high peak filter, going into a hyper dimension. Same thing, hyper is down, size is at 0 for the dimension, and the mix is at 25%. I'm using a tube distortion with the drive at 80% and a multiband compressor. Then a reverb filter with LFO1 modulating the mix from 0 to 100. The cutoff is at 32 Hz. And then the final EQ that's basically acting like another high peak filter, with LFO1 modulating both frequencies. Into the post-processing, I have an OTT with the output and time up and the amount is down, followed by a saturator at 4.5 decibels, soft clip is on, output is down, and then the final EQ just to cut the low end, shape a little bit the mids, and remove some of the high end. And then the final support layer that I have is this melodic element that I added. So this is coming from the Spitfire Audio strings sound. All of this is free, by the way, and this is really amazing. So if you don't have it, you should definitely get it. And with this, I just created this melody that I keep playing in the background of the whole drop. And now I want to show you the importance of having those support layers. So I'm going to show you the drop with only the first hits of every 4-bar section, the gun and the sub bass, and then I'm going to add all the support elements, and you're going to see that it makes all the difference in the world. So this is how it sounds without any support element.
2, if you like.
And now let me show you how it sounds with all of these support stuff.
2, if you like.
So as you can see, this is really important. And you know, you're making TEAROUT, so don't hesitate to add stuff, add sounds, add dissonance, and just experiment. If it sounds good, keep it, mix it well. If it doesn't sound good, just remove it. But you have to add support elements 100%. Otherwise, you saw how empty it sounds. Even if the gun sounds good, even if the sub sounds good, that's really not enough. So that's it for the drop, and now we're gonna go into the intro. I'm really proud of this intro. I think it sounds really amazing. And the way I started it was by creating this short piano melody. So for that melody, I'm using the grand piano, which is a stock Ableton instrument. I added some reverb and some delay, and this is how the melody sounds like. So the way to make it, every time I start a piano melody, I always start with the bass notes. And as you can see here, I chose to use the C# harmonic minor scale, and you can see that because I'm using the C note, which is not in the natural minor scale. The thing about that note in particular, it's that when you use it properly, it can create some really sad and dark vibe to your melodies, mostly because the chord coming out of this note is a diminished chord. And in my case, I wanted to have even more of that sad and scary vibe. I also used the second note of the scale, in this case the D sharp, and the D sharp is also creating a diminished chord. So when you play them together with the root note and its chord, it creates a really specific vibe that I really enjoy making when I make piano melodies. So then when I have this, I don't cut the chords from the start. I usually lay out the chords and then I create the top melody. And for the top melody, I try to keep it simple. As you can see, most of the time I'm using only two notes, the D sharp and the E, and sometime I'm going up to the F sharp and the G sharp. Sometime I'm also going down the C, but basically I'm just staying around these two notes all the way through. And when I have the melody, then I start going into the chords and slice up some notes to create a melody within the chords. Another good tip I can give you in here is that depending on the style you're trying to make, don't hesitate to create very dissonant sounding chords. For example, my C diminished chord, I'm also adding an E on top of the D sharp, and listen to this. It doesn't sound good on its own, but in the context of the melody, it adds a really big feeling. I don't know how to explain that, but experiment with this when you can. Try adding back-to-back notes like this to create dissonance. On their own, they're gonna sound bad, but in context, they might sound really good. And then after this, I added these cashmere stabs, just following the bass note of the chords. Then I added those cellos, which are coming from the Spitfire audio again. And these are playing just the bass notes and the fifth. So I'm not creating a whole chord, I'm only creating a power chord, which is the root note of the chord and the fifth. And now I'm going to show you my favorite part, which is another cello melody. Same thing, that one is also coming from Spitfire Cello Moods. And this is the main string melody that will complement the piano. This one, I don't really know how to explain how to make something like this, but you have to go with feelings. So listen to your piano and then place a note on the strings and just go from there by feeling. Don't overdo it. Don't add too much notes. You don't need to do a crazy melody. Sometimes less is more. You know, just go with your feelings and what your ears want to hear next. This is the best tip I can give you. So if you listen to this at the same time that the piano is playing, you're gonna see what I mean by this is about feelings. Alright, and then on the following part, I'm using the same melody. The only thing is that I doubled it one octave up. And then under this, I have a final violin section that will be complementing the first cello melody here. That one is also coming from Spitfire Audio. This is the strings ensemble, and this is how it sounds. And that, again, same thing, listen to what you already have and then just put what your ears want to hear. This is the best tip I can give you to create melodies like this. So together with the cello, Then coming later in the drop, I have another melody just because I wanted to keep it moving and keep it interesting. This is also a strings ensemble from Spitfire, and it's just adding this top line. And yeah, that's it for the melodic part of the intro. And then to go with this, I have these orchestral Kashmir samples, starting with this one. A big hit, this orchestral crash, those big stadium claps, and those orchestral hits. And then you just arrange them the way you want. I could probably do better with this, but this is what I have, and I think it sounds good enough for what I want to make. And then for the vocal, so some of you might have recognized it. This is the Prince Lothric vocals from Dark Souls 3. I think it fits perfectly with this melody. This is a really sad story they have, so I felt like using this. And then the final element is the build-up. Nothing too complicated. I'm using some claps and snares, a lot of sweeps up. I also have this bass sound in the background. With the filter down going up over time like this. And I also added this bass sound for the transition between this very melodic intro and the drop that's really bass oriented, and it sounds like this. So I don't remember who I saw on YouTube create that sound. It was a short. I'll try to find it and put the link in the description below. But basically, this is a sine wave. The modulation is also a sine wave. The filter is a high pass filter, and we're using the noise oscillator. The LFO1 is modulating the level on the sine wave and on the noise, and only the noise is going through the filter like this. And then what I did was I used the hertz setting on the LFO rate, and I make it go down over time just to slow it down. I'm also automating the pitch, which is going to +12 down to -12. And I'm also automating the gain of this utility just to go down and make a smooth transition. And yeah, I think that's it, guys. So I really hope you got some value out of this video. If you did, please leave a like, comment, subscribe to the channel to not miss any of the future videos. Thank you so much for watching. This is Driscoll, and I'll see you guys in the next one.
Welcome, unkindled one, purloiner of cinders. The mantle of Lord interests me none. The fire-linking curse, the legacy of lords, let it all fade into nothing. Ill-starred are they who take the throne. I shall not stand among them. You've done quite enough. Now have your rest. The royal sword of Lothric shall grant you peace. Rise if you would, for that is our curse. Our grave, but you may rest here too, if you like.